Over a year ago, I was working tirelessly to finish up my Choose Your Own Adventure FNAF timeline. On the day of the FNAF anniversary, I did not sleep at all, whether in the morning or in the night. I stayed up until around 8 AM editing everything because I had run out of time and was streaming later that day. That was the day FNAF Into the Pit came out, and I played through the whole game that day. However, when I did, because I was feeling completely dead that day, I only got one ending and then ended the stream. Because my plan was only to do one stream of the game, I kinda lost motivation to continue playing after I only got the one ending, and in not completing all the endings and all the minigames, I also lost my motivation to make theories about the game. But then, almost 8 months ago, after a long-ass dry spell of FNAF theories on my channel, I did a live stream catching up on any FNAF stuff I had missed around that time, and just discussing FNAF theories in general. However, I also had the idea to revisit Into the Pit so I could look into the lore of the game and get all the endings and secrets I could find. Most of it I've already talked about in videos before. The theory of Oswald replacing Andrew, the Stitchline Games timing, the loop theory, the implications without Stitchline Games, all discussed in videos I've already made. But there's one thing that stood out to me that I haven't talked about yet, and it is involved with something I have talked about in videos before and a theory I've believed for a long time. So we'll be discussing all that and more in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. As is common knowledge nowadays, the missing children were stuffed into the animatronics as learned in FNAF 1's newspapers and expanded upon in the Silver Eyes and the FNAF movie. We hear about the reports of blood and mucus leaking out of the eyes and mouths, and then we hear about the modern FNAF 1 location and how it was still being affected by that incident so many years ago. We also learn in FNAF 2 that the withered animatronics and the classic animatronics are the same characters. In the newspaper at the end of FNAF 2, it is stated that while the toys are being scrapped, the withered animatronics are being kept for hopes of a potential reopening with a smaller budget, that being FNAF 1 with the original animatronics. FNAF 1 is not only the same building as the original Freddy's as known by the existence of a safe room, which were shut down around the time of the missing children incident and didn't exist in FNAF 2, but also it's a smaller building than FNAF 2 itself. So the fact that it's a smaller budget and they decide to use a smaller building, which is also a building they already own, and 4 animatronics they also already own, ones that are also much less high-tech than the toys, shows that FNAF 1 is clearly that location that they're talking about, and the Withereds and Classics are just the same characters. Also, while the declared Unwithers are the animatronics used for the original Freddy's, using a different design than the classic animatronics are usually the designs used in media where FNAF 1 and 2 never opened, like Into the Pit, the Silver Eyes, and the movie. While the Unwithereds do exist in the games, they don't exist in other media, showing how the Classics and Withereds are meant to be the same animatronics. They were just redesigned after FNAF 2, probably to avoid the bad PR from the original designs. They're also both possessed by the missing kids, so they're obviously the same animatronics. However, the withered animatronics have a lot of holes in them, and some of them are even missing pieces like Withered Chica's hands and Withered Bonnie's face and arm, and yet, for some reason, there are no dead bodies modeled inside. There is a dead body modeled inside Springtrap, so since this is after the missing children incident, theoretically Scott should have modeled dead bodies inside these, and the body parts should theoretically be poking out or at least visible through some of the holes, yet they aren't. Not even so much as a drop of blood, minus apparently Withered Chica's model in FNAF VR. But speaking of that game, fast forward to its parts and service minigame, specifically Freddy's minigame. In Freddy's Repair, we pull a child's hat out of Freddy's mouth, and then we have to open up his chest cavity where we can find a child's watch and a child's shoe. There's clear signs that a dead child was once here, but an actual dead body is noticeably absent. And again, Springtrap in FNAF VR has a dead body in him, so arguing that they wouldn't model that doesn't work. If you use the argument that this is a game about Fazbear fixing their brand so they wouldn't include dead kids, that also doesn't work, because they still kept the part with the kid actually being kidnapped and killed, and it kept all the animatronic aggression and murder stuff. So this all seems to point towards the bodies of the missing children being removed at some point after the events of the missing children incident and likely before the events of FNAF 2. This is something I've believed for quite a while, and there were a few specific things that make it seem almost impossible for this not to be the case, outside of just making logical sense. For one, Phone Guy talks in FNAF 2 about how Fazbear began retrofitting the Withereds with some of the newer technology, but due to various factors, they decided not to use them and instead made the toys. In addition, like I said before, the Withereds and Classics are the same animatronics, yet the shells and even the endoskeletons themselves look different, meaning they had to, at some point, alter the designs of both the outside and the inside. Both of these things make it really hard for Fazbear to never have found those dead bodies inside, most especially because they literally had to open up the animatronics. But what I notice in Into the Pit supports that even more. There are some people who believe that the unwithered animatronics do not exist exist, and that before the events of FNAF 2, the Wizards just looked like the classics, only being different because Scott wanted to change up the models. Now, I personally think that this is a big hunk of baloney considering Unwithered Freddy is literally a part of Fazbear branding in FNAF 6, and it's one of the many topics I'm gonna bring up in a future video that I won't spoil the premise of yet. But even if you are to believe that, what Into the Pit says has really no way around it. Towards the middle of the game, Oswald meets Gabrielle, a little girl who gives him her dad's sketchbook, containing the designs for and numerous notes about the Freddy's animatronics. This book has a lot of interesting stuff in it, but what I want to focus on is company issue number 83. Inner torso repairs / investigations are to be delayed. Chica has sustained damage to her inner torso, meaning even if this isn't conducted before Freddy's shuts down, if and when Freddy's is reopened and the animatronics are used, Chica will need to be repaired. And the issue is on the inside, meaning they will have to open her up and the body inside will therefore be found. Some may argue this to be an alternate universe, but even if I were to agree with that, I'd find it really weird if this was brought up for no reason. To me, it seems like a very heavy indication that the animatronics will need to be opened up at one point or another, leading to Fazbear Entertainment finding the dead bodies and then disposing of them and covering it up to avoid tarnishing their brand even more, which also shows a darker side of Fazbear. Obviously, we know Fazbear is just as bad as Afton even without him, and this sort of adds to that. However, there is one counter to this that I feel like a bunch of you will probably bring up if I don't address it: the week before. In this book, there's a part where you have to screw Bonnie's head on properly, and if you don't, his head will fall off, ruining a girl's birthday party and leaking blood everywhere. In this same section of the book, Ralph notices a set of human teeth inside Bonnie's head. So, does that mean that the missing kids are still in the animatronics? Well, no, for a few reasons. First, this is at least 4 years after the missing children incident, meaning all the blood and flesh would be completely dried up, meaning the blood that came out of Bonnie's head cannot be Jeremy's. As for the human teeth inside, that's specifically at the head, and like I said before, Withered Bonnie is classic Bonnie, so the lack of a human head in Withered Bonnie's face, or lack thereof, indicates that this is not the same body. Plus, the missing kids would probably be stuffed more in the chest cavity, or more akin to the body in Golden Freddy and the New Kid, so I doubt the head would be high enough to peek through the head of the animatronic itself. In FNAF 1, Phone Guy talks about how other guards have worked and been killed by the animatronics. Honestly, it's hard to pinpoint when this would have happened considering Ralph has supposedly been the guard since the end of FNAF 2, but the animatronics also may have killed other people, and the dead body in Bonnie was probably a newer victim of the animatronics. Or, worst case, it could just simply be an agony construct or spirit-induced hallucinations or illusions. The week before does note the posters on the walls changing like in FNAF 1, something clearly caused by paranormal activity, so this isn't that far-fetched. One last argument against the kids being found is the fact that that never happens in other universes. In Fazbear Frights, the Silver Eyes, and the movies, the missing kids' bodies are still inside the animatronics even years later. However, that's not really the same, because in all those universes, Freddy's never opens again, and those animatronics aren't used again. Both the FNAF 2 and FNAF 1 locations never open, and Freddy's is shut down for good after the missing children incident, at least until a random resurgence in modern day during both Frights and Tales. The game's universe is the only one where Freddy's actually does open again, and the only one where those animatronics are used again rather than just being abandoned, so those rules don't really apply. Overall, it seems that Fazbear ended up finding the bodies sometime between 1985 and 1987, after the missing children incident, but before FNAF 2. Fazbear ends up disposing of them, covering it up, but despite that, they still don't actually clean them, which is why they still smell like they have corpses in them, and why Ralph says they haven't been cleaned in over 20 years. But honestly, I think the weirdest thing about almost the entire series is the fact that children were killed at Freddy's. The bodies were never found, and then the animatronics started to smell like dead bodies and began leaking blood and mucus. This was all in the news, and the police could never find the bodies to convict Afton. Like, I feel like it doesn't take a genius to solve. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and let me know if you agree with the theory. But I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!